It depends in different parts. On the west coast, it is the period just after the monsoon is the most humid,
Mhm.
and in
Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah, are we on?
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. We are live.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. So a very good morning or good evening to you, depending on which part of the world you are in. There was no way that I would miss the pleasure of having this interaction with someone that has been arriving in India for a while but hasn't made it yet. He had one Oscar in his hand after The Life of Pi, and then that's when he was supposed to be here with the team, and that didn't happen. And then now he has another Oscar in his hand for 1917, where he was, you know, in a bow tie, I assume, on a stage this year, and he still hasn't been able to come and share that with some of the team. Of course, the team is spread in 3 locations, but there was another way to do this, and with the virtual world taking over, Guillaume, a very, very warm welcome to you to be with us live from LA, live from CII in New Delhi, but virtually everywhere. Before we kick off, I'd just like to tell everyone that I've already given away some of the highlights that, you know, this is not about winning the award. This is about the artistry and the wonderful human being that Guillaume is, who brings that humanness and that craft to what he does on every single project that he's worked on. So I guess his house has a very long shelf, because he has not only the Academy Awards, but he's won the BAFTA and he's won the VES Awards, and he's won other stuff which is really, really sensational. So I just feel that Guillaume, it's a rare honor and privilege to have you here. And we titled this as broadly as we could, saying that we are going to create iconic imagery, and that's what you do, you know, almost every day. So maybe you want to kick off a little bit by telling us about maybe just straight away 1917, because that's what's on everybody's mind who's watching you here. It was your latest exploit. It is, and I'll let you describe it, because there were so many unique things about it that I don't think have been done before. I don't know if anybody will do it, but maybe we'll let you kick off.
Sure.
And just thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. You know, it's really an incredible pleasure and honor to, you know, be able to talk to everybody. And, you know, as you said, you know, I've been meaning to come meet the team and the people for many, many years. And, you know, we unfortunately live in a world where, you know, right now we can't travel and you know, where things are keeping really busy. But, you know, it's really special to me to be able to present 1917 today, because it's a movie that is not a movie that is only about technology. It's about the artistry of making a film. And I think, you know, I've been asked many times, you know, during, you know, the marketing campaign of the film and the award season, many people have asked me, but, you know, how did you guys do that? How did you create a movie in one continuous shot? You know, what technology did you invent so you were able to do this? And, you know, my answer is, well, it's not about the technology, it's about the artists, because everything in this movie is absolutely handcrafted. And it's pretty, you know, incredible and remarkable that, you know, a lot of, you know, the movie went through visual effects, right? The movie is 2 hours long, and, you know, over 90% of the film went through visual effects. And, you know, the team at MPC in Montreal and, you know, in Bangalore basically were the key artisan to realize it. And, you know, I would even say, and I'll talk about it a bit more in detail, but, you know, we created what we call the Stitch team, which is the team of artists that came from multiple disciplines that were in charge of looking at every transition that we do in the movie, and they handcrafted every transition to be absolutely seamless. And this team was based in Bangalore. It's 100% Indian team. So it was really remarkable the work, because it's nobody has done that before. Nobody did what you guys did. So it's really a great pleasure to present it. So I'm going to do my presentation, I guess, in 4 parts. I'm going to start by showing you what I call the finals reel, which is the highlights from the movie. It's 6 minutes long, with the audio of the movie. So for the people who haven't seen the movie, it's a good way to see a bit of what we've done. And obviously, I had to put cuts in it. The movie has no cuts, so you'll see it's going to jump from scene to scenes. And then after that, we'll talk about the main challenge and the stitching, and then I have a before and after reels to show you a bit of the behind the scenes, and I'll do a bit of a presentation on it, and then we'll touch on various parts, and then I think we'll have a Q&A after, so I can answer any question that
Would you like to, in a few lines, introduce the subject of the movie for a few people that might not have seen it, as to what the movie is?
Yeah. So it's a World War I movie directed by Sam Mendes, British director, and the movie follows 2 British soldiers, 2 British kids that are on a mission to deliver a message through the trenches and through the battlefields of World War I. So that's the movie. It's a journey going from A to B, and it never stops and it never cuts. So I'm going to share the finals reel, and then there we go, and hopefully the audio will work.
Yeah.
You're live once more.
Oh, good. Okay. So, hi everyone. I hope you're still there. All good things come in small parcels. So here we are with the part two of the wonderful journey of 1917 with Guillaume. And I hope most of you saw the clip. It brought back fantastic memories. Before you proceed, Guillaume, I wanted to ask. I got the feeling like I'm in a video game. Is that just because of the technique of the movie? Was it intentional? I mean, why do I feel that way?
Yeah, it's a great question because that's true. It's video games, first person, kind of or like even third person, kind of games. You're following always the character, right? Because you are the main actor. And Sam, the director, was partially inspired when he saw one of his kids play video game on his PlayStation, and he was like, oh, how interesting is that you basically always follow your character no matter what he does, right? So yeah, it's kind of like you literally always with our character, you never leave them ever. There's once in a film where the camera just like goes off him, but that's really it. So it really is akin to a game in that way, because it's about the character. It's not about things that are around him, right? So yeah, but yeah, it's what's interesting is the movie is roughly 2 hours, right? And to do that, often people ask me, well, how many shots did you stitch together? Like 3, 4? And it was like, hold on, it's like we shot the movie over 64 days. And 64 days, we don't work at night. Or, it's like, we have to go sleep sometimes, right? So, you always have to at least, the last shot that you're doing one day has to be stitched with the first shot, you're doing another day. And, the stitching was done for, a lot of reasons. First, you can't shoot an entire movie in just one take. It's been done, but not like this, because it's too big. It's too it's too long of a journey. And it really is, when you watch the film, you're following our characters, but in reality the locations that you're seeing are hundreds of miles apart. So if you go, for example, is in No Man's Land, and No Man's Land is in the east side of England, and then you end up in the trenches, and you're back at Shepperton Studio on the back lot, and then we go into the Burning City, which is another set, and then we go it's transitioning to places that are like very far away from each other. So that was another reason of the stitching, is that there was no place where we could just say, hey, okay, let's just go shoot the movie in one take if we could. Also, the last reason was to work with Roger Deakins, the legendary cinematographer, and his camera work. He always designed his camera work in this movie to not be another character. It's basically to just be as discreet as possible, so you don't think about it. You don't think, oh, look at the beautiful camera move, or look at how elaborate this shot is. It's really to try to be as transparent as possible and follow our characters. So it's all about the characters and about nothing else. But to do that, you have to use different camera rigs. Sometimes you have to follow, our soldiers, with a Steadicam. And then right after that, you need to go over a crater. So you need to put the camera on the big giant wire that's going to cross the crater. And then, you need to use a crane because you need to push through a trench. So, we had to also create transitions for all these moments, for like, okay, we're going to shoot this moment with the Steadicam and shoot with the Steadicam. And then they come out of the trench. Now we're going to shoot this moment on the wire and shoot it. And then we stitch both together. So it was really an incredible kind of collaboration, because you have to not only kind of make it work technically, but you have to find the best solution every time for the story. So, as the visual effects team, you go through a lot of planning of like, okay, how are we gonna, we're gonna stitch this location and this location. How do we do that? Where's the place? We need to stitch this camera move to this camera move. And I think, what's really unique and what was really difficult on this movie is the world is never repeating. We're outside and it's a journey that never repeats itself. And the one-shot movie have been done before when you're in a house, for example, you're in a room and you can use walls to create transition, or you have places to hide, whereas in our case sometimes there's nowhere to hide. We did transitions, and credits to our amazing stitch team that did that, because we did transitions on close-ups of actors. It's like it's one take on an actor and then we just do the transition on their face, because we found that the magic trick is when you do the transitions where people don't think you're going to make them. If you see a tree and the camera goes behind a tree, if you do a transition there, your audience is like, oh, there's going to be a transition there, so they're going to find it, they're going to see it. But if you do it in plain sight, nobody thinks about it. You just, and you fool your audience, and you kind of like create that little magic trick. So it was really a tight collaboration, because you have to, it has to be between Sam, the director, and us visual effects, and Roger, the director of photography, the Dennis Gassner, the production designer. So we get what we need, and obviously the special effects team to create some practical elements. So you create the illusion of a never repeating exterior world. That was really an important thing. And keep in mind, there's literally visual effects on 90% of the film. So it's the movie is 2 hours, so it's an hour and 50 minutes worth of visual effects that we did also in 4K and in IMAX format. So that's important. But as I'm starting to kind of talk about how we made it, I have a little kind of breakdown reel that I want to play, and I'm going to talk a bit over it, so I can explain how things were made. So I'm going to share my screen again. There we go. And there's no audio there, but I will basically describe some of the work that you're seeing. So Sam Mendes wanted to create a unique experience by making the movie a single continuous shot, and we delivered it in 4K IMAX. And as I mentioned, the story follows two British soldiers on a mission to deliver a critical message. And the 1 hour and 59 minutes of the movie is comprised of multiple shots that we stitched together. And those stitches were engineered to switch between sets, locations, and camera rigs, as you can see here. And each one was designed as a collaboration, between special effects, visual effects, the director of photography, Roger Dickens, to create the illusion of a never repeating exterior world. And the plane crash is a great example, because it utilized multiple techniques to show the plane first in a dogfight, then it crashes into a barn, and finally interacts with our main actors in one seamless event with no cuts. So the plane is CG before we transition to a full-size special effects plane that we shot against a blue screen. Then we combine both elements into the first plate, and then we switch to a second plate with the plane dressed on location, so our actors can interact seamlessly with the pilot and the plane cockpit. The creation of the continuous exterior world involved an array of visual effects work on 91% of the movie's runtime, including digital environments, character, vehicle animation, destruction, pyro, water effects. And in some instances, as you can see here, we blended shots that were captured on locations hundreds of miles apart, even though the locations look, similar. The haunting look of the burning city here is a really interesting collaboration between special effects and the director of photography, because they engineered magnesium flares to burn at a specific color, and they were rigged to travel on giant rigs 130 feet in precisely 22 seconds to create the beautiful lighting that you see. The sequence was shot on a partial set with destroyed architecture and fire effects, and we put those giant banks of light to create the fire. And then we replaced them by a CG replica of the French church that we found in the northern of France. The edges of town here are also created digitally, so we could continuously connect to the following scene, the river scene that was shot in a completely different location. Here, as you can see, the bridge jump switches to a full digital shot in order to keep the flow of action and the camera move as free-flowing as the rest of the film. The river sequence here was particularly challenging, especially for the stitches. Practical water and splashes had to transition across different plates that were blended together. CG water simulation were created to extend the environment and make the transition seamless. We shot it in an Olympic water park in the UK, so special effects could install underwater air pumps to simulate interaction with rocks. With several minutes long shots, I think creating effects that held up to scrutiny, without cuts across unbroken scenes and in 4K IMAX really made for a unique and creative logistical challenge. Special effects and visual effects played really an integral role in enabling a unique form of storytelling by continuously following our characters through the battlefields of World War I.
Wow. That is as magical as the movie itself. And just taking us behind there, Guillaume, is, this is like a magician that is, sharing his tricks with everyone.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because when we, Sam, the director, didn't want us to reveal our magic tricks for a long time. He's like, please don't, you can talk about the visual effects, but don't give too much of the details. So you guys are pretty much the first to see an in-depth presentation of what went in to create some of those stitches.
This is indeed an honor, because it's like a premiere in itself, right, of 1970.
Yeah, no, for sure, and it's really I thought it was a really great use of all our collective knowledge. It's like we've all been doing that for a long time, and we've been at MPC, I've been at MPC for 15 years now, and I've been involved in Harry Potter movies, and I've been involved in fantastical creatures such as Godzilla, and more realistic films, things like this, and we have like such a legacy now of creature animation and creation of environments, and we've always applied it to create fantastical worlds, animals that talk, that can't talk, or giant monsters that don't exist, or things like this. But using all that knowledge on 1917 was really a unique experience, because the work is incredibly complicated. Some of it, like the plane crash, for example, which is one of my favorite visual effects sequence in the movie, because if you don't think about it, you don't think it's a visual effects, but it's really, how do you blend between different elements, and it has to be absolutely photoreal, from the look of the plane to the simulations of the dirt and the grass and the fire, to really be not distracting, and I remember when we started the plane crash, we started to put a bit too much fire on it, and Sam, the director, was like, oh no, it's too distracting, there's too much fire, and like, well, but it's, you have to see it, and it's like, no, it's like, it's all about not losing sight of it has to be unremarkable, in a certain way. It's the same way as when Schofield jumps over the bridge, for example. It's a scene I worked on with Roger a lot, because I really wanted the lighting and the camera work to be in line with the work is done on set, even though it was a full digital shot. And when I was talking to the teams and the animators and the lighting TVs and the compositors, I was always like, it needs to be unremarkable. We're not trying to do a superhero, super beautiful jump. It has to just be a jump. He's jumping off the bridge because he's running for his life, and the cameraman that is filming him is jumping for his life too, over the bridge. And that's, and it became a rule, for how we just looked at the work in general, and to be completely invisible. And it was really hard, for example, with No Man's Land, because No Man's Land is, the environment is fully CG. It's like the actors are walking in a field, but it's a fully CG environment, and the sequence is 6.5 minutes long without cutting. So you're watching CG environments. Oh, are we done?
Including the water they splash when they're walking and everything. That's all CG.
Yeah, so that, some of this was practical. Where they walk is practical, but then we extended, and we created more puddles, and we created the fog, and the whole landscape. And on a normal movie, you'd be just like, sure, it's easy. It's a set extension. We've done it many times, and it's never easy to get something that is photoreal and looks great in the film. But what was really difficult, it was 6.5 minutes long without ever cutting from it. So not only it has to be photoreal, but it has to be your layouts. It's like you can put a tree somewhere, and then you run the scene, and suddenly the camera turns back, and then the tree is creating an ugly composition, and you're like, oh no, so we need to move the tree. And on a normal movie, you cheat. You can be like, okay, the tree can be there on this shot, and then we cut, and then here, it's not particularly nice, so we're going to move the tree, and we move the tree. But you can't in that case because the tree you never cut, right? So you have to really reinvent, how you work. And I think that as I was mentioning before, there was, we didn't invent new technology to do the film, even though it would have been impossible to do a movie like this without technology. But we invented new ways of working for our artists, and our artists truly invented new ways of reviewing the work, because instead of reviewing a couple seconds of shots, you're reviewing scenes that are minutes long, and just to go back to what I was talking about earlier, where saying that our collective experience of doing that for a long time has been really helpful to make the film. I think really where we all learned a lot, and I learned a lot, and the team really learned, was that I spent my career learning magic tricks to fool the audience with cuts, right? It's like you're like, okay, it's like, here's you have to do a photoreal character, but it's like it has to hold up and look really good for 3 seconds, and then the camera cuts, the shot cuts, and then you're from another angle. So your job is to find the magic tricks through cutting of a movie to create the magic, and fool the audience in thinking that what they're looking is real. And where we really learn is like, well, on this one we have to put all that through the window, because you can't use your usual tricks. You can't use like, okay, it's like on the cut I can obscure this a little bit, or I can play with lighting. It's like there was none of this. So it was a really steep learning curve, I think, for all of us, to just be like, well, it's just a different thing. It's not just about like 3 seconds of like getting something that looks really good. It's about like, okay, it's like 6 minutes. How do we make it look good for 6 minutes, right? So it was really, about, I think, the way, we invented, kind of methodologies to work like this, but also I think you need incredible artists to really understand that and pull it off, basically, So,
this is a very interesting point that you make, because if we look back over some years in the fantastic work that you have led us through, the stylistic differences are so stark. I think, I can remember a lot of the, we had to adapt that manga style of Ghost in the Shell to what you were doing there. And I think before that, obviously, there's this fantastic, I must tell you a funny story about the Gareth Edwards Godzilla that you worked on. So we got a poster framed from London to put up in our reception. And this poster had lots of effects on the poster. What had happened was that it came with a glass frame, and the frame shattered, and it made all kinds of cuts in the poster.
Oh, wow.
And so when we opened and put it up, we said, wow, that's a very special poster that they made for us. So we sometimes get effects that we don't intend, but it's a funny story. And we've always had that poster up there. And going back before that, I think, the Bond movie, I think Man of Steel, I think we worked with you on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's so many memories from Percy Jackson and all of the great stuff. So tell me how, when you talked of artistic solutions for this movie, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but each of these require different types of artistry. And how do you, I mean, an actor normally prepares himself or herself to be in that role, right? They want to get
Yeah.
into that role. How is it for a visual effects supervisor, guru like yourself? How do you prepare for this transition, or do you prepare for it, or how does it happen?
Well, it's really all about, as you mentioned, with an actor, the best actors are always very prepared, right? You cannot really invent things, or you can improvise a little bit, but I think it really is about, you know, trying to gain an understanding of how do I make the movie better, basically. It's always the way I try to think, and every movie has different rules. It's not like, as you say, the Man of Steel has very different rules than, Life of Pi, that has very different rules than 1917. They're completely different movies. So, it really is first and foremost trying to understand what the movie needs and how the director wants to uh, his movie to feel, right? It's like, you can read a script and you say, oh, there's an explosion. But then one director is going to be like, oh, it has to be like the biggest explosion you've ever seen. And another one is going to be like, no, it has to be like, just like a little bit of debris, or another, it's like everybody has a different approach. So you need to understand first, what is the stylistic choices that the director is going to want. Then, once you kind of, I think, gain a clear understanding of this and, develop a common language with the director, he really is trying to visualize in your head. Okay, it's like, that would be, kind of the most effective shot design, and I'm a big believer in shot design. I think, it's a thing I've learned through my career is like, a good design is going to solve most of your problems. If you start with something where, the idea is not very good, or you try to fix, a shot that doesn't really work for the movie, you really struggle, because you do spend a lot of your creative energy in trying to make, a circle fit into a square, So it really is about like getting that understanding. Then, when I talk to the teams, and the artists, I have to give communicate a very clear message. You said, I mean, it's like, it's all about getting a clear understanding, of, for, all the artists to make the right choices, when they do their work, and it's something that, I think is a really immensely important um, element, of the visual effects work. Is you have to, as an effects TD, as an animator, as a layout artist, as a lighting TD, it's like, it's not just about doing, the task. Is trying to understand what is the how is it going to fit into the movie, because that's really where, you can use your skills and your talents to really fit in the film. So I'm trying to explain that as clearly as possible, how it would fit in the film, and, all these things, and give my version of what I think the shot needs to be, and basically, kind of go for it. I think it's really important. And sometimes, I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, but, and sometimes, you even the director gets it wrong, and you're just like, oh, okay, I thought it would be a good idea, and you adjust a little bit. And, it's a creative endeavor. So you have to accept that, sometimes, things are not as straightforward as you hope. But the one thing I think I always try to keep in mind is like, on a shot, that is 3 seconds of film, sometimes it's the work of 20 people, because it's so complicated. There's so much to do into it, that, for those 20 people to do the work that works for the film, you have to, be able to give them the right direction. On Life of Pi, we worked on one shot that is I think it's 8 seconds in a movie, and we worked on that one shot for 2.5 years. Because it was the shot where we developed, the water simulation tools and the look of the film. It was just really a difficult one, but we worked on it for a long, long time because that's just what it takes sometimes, right? But it's
This was the
it's all about
this was the 2 storm sequences that on Life of Pi, right? We did, and thinking of the ship, I think, because RNH was involved, and then we were involved in those parts of it. So I think
Correct.
that was really water driven. Our whole involvement was substantial.
Yeah, and that's where we developed, at the time, it's like, water simulations were not as commonly developed as they are today. And, I remember looking at the movie and I was just like, oh my God, how are we going to do that? And, just to branch off quickly on that topic on Life of Pi, it's like, what was really hard and where we cracked it was not just to simulate water. It's like, how do you manage to choreograph it, treat it like a character, tell the story that, Ang Lee, wanted to talk. He was very precise in the way, we designed, the shots and things like this. And, that's where we kind of designed, a brand new pipeline and way of working of, animators being able to animate the water surface. And then, I could show that to Ang, and Ang was like, great, okay, the choreography is good. And then, FX could pick that up and then start to do, simulations on top, with a technique that we call the refined sheets at the time, which was kind of groundbreaking in its concept, because it was the first time that we solved how do you simulate an ocean without having to simulate it from the bottom of the ocean and, choreograph it. So it was really an interesting application of like, well, how do you use technology and technique and apply it to storytelling, because that's the problem that you have to unlock, it's like, and that's how you become successful, I think, in creating movies. It's like, how do you contribute to, helping to tell that story, right? And, that's very much what we did on 1917, it was literally, okay, it's like, how do we, really, put, everything we do, you have to look at it from, the lens of 1917, which has to be a certain style and it has to be invisible, absolutely invisible. So, you put all your efforts towards that, right? To make it, you use, your, combined experience, as a group and, the incredible technology that we have to create something that hopefully nobody will know that there's visual effects in,
No, that's fantastic. And I think that's also informed a lot of subsequent, I think that work informed a lot of subsequent amazing water-driven movies. I think we did at least a couple of Pirates of the Caribbean after that. Yeah. And then that incredible true story, The Finest Hours, I think, for Disney, which was off the East Coast from the US. And I think there, it just shows that like with destruction and just like with other things that we've kind of crowds and simulating all kinds of stuff, but water is really is the challenge of its own, isn't it?
Oh yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's I feel now that we kind of understand it better, even though it's still an incredibly complicated topic. But it's true, at the time it was truly just like mind-boggling, just to think about how we were gonna simulate all this, we have nowhere near as much computer power as we have now. And it was literally just like, how do we kind of solve that? Because the great danger with complicated effects like this is like sometimes the technology and the way you approach it cancels your ability of focusing on images because it's too complicated, it's too complex, and I've done that in the past where you work on some effects that are so complicated to solve that all your energy goes towards purely solving them. It's like, how do we get a giant monster coming out of the ocean? And it's like, it's taking, just the simulations themselves, are going to take 2 weeks on the render farm to just simulate the water. And then when you see it, well, that's it. It's not like you're going to do a lot of versions because you're just like, well, now I need to do the rest, right? So, it was really for us on Life of Pi about, how do we solve that? How do we make sure that, every shot, we don't have to wait for a month, for the shots to simulate. And then we see them and then we're like, oh, okay, well, that's not really, doing the right thing. And then, you don't have time to actually focus on designing the good shots, right? So, yeah.
So Guillaume, there are questions coming into me. Maybe I can just take them in any order, and
Of course.
Feel free to jump back into the flow of the 1970s story. But I wanted to take you on a little bit of a journey because it's the first time we have the pleasure of at least seeing you amongst a wide group of people in these parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the question came up, I think you touched upon collaboration earlier in 1917. We've done a lot of visual effects coming into film and television in India, in Asia, in other parts of the world, not necessarily at the scale and the budget and the it's not mounted to that same level because you have to always make a movie where you can recover the money from the market, right? And I think the question was, so what is your advice to people coming together for the first time, a director, a cinematographer, a visual effects supervisor, maybe an editor? I mean, everyone plays a very key collaborative role. Yeah. So how does this really work? Do you actually sit down before once the team is cast and you know who these people are? I mean, what goes on? What's the war room to make this movie? What does it feel like, look like? What do you say to each other? Do you ask about each other's children or family, or you just get straight into the movie? Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question because that's, making a movie is about people, and I think it's really, an aspect that is key because you have to understand each other. Your best collaborators, for all of us are the ones where, you truly understand each other's goals, approaches, way of thinking. And it's no different, with a movie. I think it's really, generally the way it works is the director is the brain of the film, if I may say. Is the person that is the captain of the ship. Is the person that really, we're gonna execute his vision, right, or her vision. And I think it's really coming down to, first, meeting together with the director and, just talking about, sometimes you're going to talk about the movie, you're going to talk about certain scenes, but it's really trying to understand if you speak a language that is compatible, right? Because it's really hard, making a movie is hard, but it's even harder if you don't speak the same creative language. And I think that's really for me, it's always the first thing that, you kind of look at is, do we understand each other in a way that is, do we have the same references, the same sensibilities, or if not, because you don't have to have exactly the same tastes, but are they complementary, and I think it's really trying to kind of understand that and, kind of trust each other that way, that creatively, we're on the same page because, nobody here will need a reminder, that, visual effects is not like, immediate. You say, I mean, it's not like you say, hey, let's put the character on the cliff there and then let's see a version, because it takes time to animate. It takes time to, you have to think about it, and how you do it. And, you have to get artists to work on every part, right? So it's not like, you can just put things together and hope that it's going to go well. So it really is, the first thing is like, do you speak a language that is similar and do you understand each other? And generally, it's the director is the person creating the team, right? So he's going to hire its director of photography, it's going to hire its editor, it's going to hire its visual effects supervisor. As the team is assembled, we spend a lot of time together. In pre-production, we spend a lot of time with, because pre-production is really where you design the film. So you spend a lot of time with the production designer, with the director of photography, with the editor, not the editor yet, the director, because, you really, be like, okay, it's like the script says this happens. So how do we do it? What's the best way to do it? And so, you have to spend a lot of time, with those people. And I think you have to, kind of, again, have a similar language because you want to achieve a similar goal. Then in post-production, is the same thing. It's like the editor is, the biggest collaborator that you have, because, it's literally you and the editor and the director shaping the movie and making sure that, the movie works, right? So I think it's really, you have to be on the same page. But I think also, and I think it's a really important thing, at least to me, is that you have to be willing to learn, I think, on every movie, and it's something that's why I love this job. It's like, I don't like when I do something that I have done already. It's like, I like when I start a movie, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. Because I think that's really where you do, you have a chance to expand your horizon and create, work that is really interesting. And I feel it's the same, working with, with the teams of artists. There's nothing I like better than, when, I talk to the team, the visual effects team, and then, sometimes you see a shot coming back and it's not at all what you had in mind, but you're like, oh, you really understood what I was trying to say. It's not what I imagined. It's even better, and it happens sometimes that, you just see it and like, wow, it's like, it's better than I thought. It's not what I thought it was. So I think it's really, always being open-minded, and always being, kind of open to change as well, because, a movie is about telling a story. And I think that's the for me, in my career, I started as a roto artist, and then, in France, and then, I became, an animator and then a lighter. And then, it's like, I worked as an artist. And, I think throughout the years, what is really important is to understand that, we really do that job because we love telling stories. So it is important to always try to keep that in mind, right? So, long answer. Sorry.
So fascinating. But is it when you started off as an artist? So I think what I got from your answer was, look, there is a creative contribution being made to the story under the overall helm of the director's vision. But not only the people that we mentioned, the VFX soup and the cinematographer, but there are many people that bring an artistic contribution to as this pans out, right? That's what we got from that.
Absolutely. And I think, as an artist, when I was working on shots, I was always taking incredible pride in, trying to create the best looking shots that I could imagine. And sometimes I was like, oh, I have a great idea. And, I was doing a version with the idea, because you just like, you have to think like a filmmaker,
When you started out then, were you waiting to see that your name will come in the credits somewhere with the many other people?
Yes.
All the artists are waiting to, we can never get everybody on that screen. But, when we go and see the movie as a team and when the credits come up, oh, you should see the whistling and the shouting.
No, absolutely.
If I'm not mistaken, when you were an artist, it wasn't. So you worked on like The Matrix Reloaded and Batman Begins. I mean, it was even then a fantastic slate of movies, right?
Yeah. No, The Matrix Reloaded was my first credit on an American movie.
Right.
And as you said, seeing my name in the credits, I was just like, it's kind of like a dream come true. It's like, I was like, just living in France and Paris, and for me, that's Hollywood movies were a distant dream. You see what I mean?
When people ask some of the senior leadership, my colleagues and I, what is the greatest thing that you've achieved, in building up the studio here in Bangalore, in India. Now we have a team in Mumbai as well. So the biggest thrill is that we've got hundreds of people, hundreds of artists, average age 27, 29, 26, depends on the movie. Hundreds of artists who, in 5 or 7 years of their experience, have worked on the world's biggest titles. I mean,
Yes.
that is a pride and joy, right? It overcomes everything else that you can think of, and
Yeah, no, absolutely.
that absolutely is what it is. There is another question that's come up. It says, for people that want to embrace visual effects in TV series and the smaller budget movies, regional movies in India, etc. Is there advice you can give them? How should they go about it? I mean, they've never done that before, and of course they've done the simpler effects when it's titling and stuff like that, but not as a part of storytelling. So, is there something that you can tell emerging creatives as to what are the 1, 2, 3 starting things that you'd want them to think about just a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think if you want to do visual effects, on smaller budgets and more kind of independent production, it's like you have to think smart. Basically, you have to think, the most complicated way is not always the best way, right? And I would say that I worked on very, very big movies, and I never worked on a movie that had enough money to do everything that we wanted to do. I've always had a meeting with a producer, always a director, at some point to just be like, look, we need to rethink some of it because we can't afford it, So, the creative appetite is always really big, no matter how you look at it, right? But I think, the advice I would always say is, really think about how you can shoot things for real. I think it's always the important thing for me, even as a starting point, because it's going to make your life easier. You see what I mean? In terms of, even if you're going to replace it, for example, I would just always say, hey, it's like, if you want to create a beautiful sunset, a character in front of a sunset, but you want the sky to be really different and specific, I would say maybe don't shoot it against a green screen. Shoot a real sunset, a person in front of a sunset, and then replace the sky. But already, you're starting from something that gives you a base of reality. So, I think it's really, kind of creating a safety net like this, where, if at some point you're just like, well, I really wanted to replace the sunset, but, my budget is tight and I have to choose, whether I, create this scene or I replace the sunset. You can leave the sunset as it is in your movie and spend your budget and your time on something else. So it's always, trying to shoot for real, always have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C.
Okay.
And and then I think, on smaller projects, and this is how I started, is like, learn to do everything yourself. I think it's, for me, it was a funny thing, when I started in France, there were no disciplines. It was just like, hey, this is your shot. You're just going to do it, and I was just like, you do the roto, the tracking, the animation, the compositing, the lighting, the effects. You just do everything yourself, right? And it works when you do things that are not too complicated. Obviously, shots are way too complicated now, to do that. But when it gives you an overall understanding as to what it takes to make a shot, and really what is important, to to create, you know, an interesting visual and interesting looking shot. So I would really encourage to, you know, kind of learn to do, you know, everything yourself, especially now, you know, with that, you know, you can do it at home, you know, with like amazing free softwares like Blender, for example. It's free.
Yep.
I'm using it myself at home. It's amazing. You know, I wish I had that when I started. Or Unreal, you know, the Unreal Engine, where, you know, you know, it's free as well. And you know, you can learn how to create, you know, visuals and see them. So, you know, I feel now, you know, the technology and the technique is getting simpler. So now, you know, you can really embrace, you know, trying it and, you know, just doing it. So that would be my advice. You know, it's like, it's really, you know, try to shoot it out for real, have multiple plans, and then just don't be afraid to experiment yourself. You know, it's like, you know, I to this day, I always love to do that myself. Sometimes, you know, I'm going to be like, hey, I'm going to animate a camera myself, you know, so I can show the director I'm going to do this myself, you know, or, you know, you know, I love photography. I do a lot of photography. So sometimes I'm just going to go take photographs and just to either get ideas or show the director, hey, you know, it's like, what do you think of something like this, you know? And so it's really trying to not be afraid to be hands-on. And sometimes, you know, like simple things really work, you know?
Fantastic, fantastic. I think we have time for one more question. They're referring, I think the questions comes to the point you made earlier about pre-production.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how much of the movie do you see, I guess they mean storyboard or art designer, how much of the movie do you see before it is made? And in 1917, how much of the movie turned out like you saw it before?
That's a great question. Well, I will say that 1917 is the exception of what I've seen a lot throughout my career, because the movie came out pretty much similar as it was planned, because it had to be planned. You see what I mean? It's like there's no cuts. So when you build a set and you shoot a scene, it's not like you can cut a scene out of the movie, or it's not like you can just cut it differently, or, you know, it literally is the movie that you design is the movie that, you know, you see on screen. You know, there's always smaller changes, but, you know, I think 1917 was very particular for this, because, you know, it was precisely storyboarded by Roger and by Sam, and, you know, then the set was built based on that. Then we decided what the transitions and the stitches would be based on that. And, you know, in post-production, we improved, you know, some of the scenes. You know, it's like we changed methodology on some things a little bit, because, you know, not everything works the way you always want. But the movie is, credit to Sam, is very much, you know, as he was in his head during pre-production. Other movies it's you know, it really varies. You know, it's like there's some directors that do storyboards and then that do previews, and then I'm just like, you know, I don't want to shoot this at all. You know, I'm gonna go shoot something else, and just like, okay, you know, why did you do all this? But I think it's you know, what I came to understand is, you know, storyboards. You know, it's like there's multiple stages for a director to create its movie. The first stage is you write the script. The script
Right.
is your first version of the movie, and, you know, we will read it, and, you know, that's the first version of the movie. Then you storyboard it, right? And when you storyboard it, that's where you create your second version of the movie. And, you know, now that you start to see visuals, and now that you start to see, you know, how it plays out, you adjust your script a little bit. Then you previs, and you don't have to previs everything, but you previs whatever needs to give you an understanding of movements, right? Because that sometimes you're just like, well, you know, storyboards don't really describe how a scene works well enough. And that's the third time that you're doing your movie, basically, and just your third chance. And then, you know, you shoot it, and then that's the fourth time you're doing it. And, you know, then you go in the editing room, And, having done the movie 4 times, right? That's really where you can, decide, okay, well, hopefully after 4 times, you're just like, the movie is going to be great and be just what it is. But again, it's a creative process. So, some actor performances are going to be better than you thought. Some scenes are not going to work as well as you thought, or the movie is going to be too long, or you always, kind of gets adjusted. But I think what remains on the good films and working with the, with good directors is the vision that you read in that script is the same as the what is in the movie. It's the same approach, it's the same kind of vision. The details might be different, but it's the same idea, right? So because the movie has a message, or the movie is taking a specific angle. So, but it really is, as visual effects supervisors with the directors, we're the only ones to be there from the start to the end. Nobody else is, because the production designer is going to leave after you shoot. The cinematographer is going to leave after you shoot. The editor is starting only after you shoot, so you're the only ones to see it. So you see the evolution of the film a lot. And I think that's, it's really interesting, especially on big visual effects film. It's the challenge, at least, that I've seen, and that, we're getting better at and we're solving, is like, how do you help a director to see his movie as quickly as possible, right? Because that's really what it is. It's you shoot the movie, and then, I remember when I did Godzilla, for example, you shoot the movie, but then before you do the visual effects, there's literally no movie, because it's actors talking. It's like there's nothing happening. It's like, and the locations and all these things, and so you have to create a version of the movie with visual effects to be like, okay, is the movie working? Yes or no? So it's really, I think, for me, the next great challenge, with visual effects is that, how do you do it in a way where you help the director craft his story as quickly as possible, right? Not to finish the visual effects, because that we know how to do very well and we're really good at it. But it's like, how do you prototype it really quickly, to just make sure that, then when you spend the time doing the complex simulation and the hard lighting and the comp that is really hard and all these things, you're doing it on the right thing. You're not changing the shot after, right? So, so yes, movie change a lot, but I think it's also going to become our job more and more to help directors understand if the movie is working, yes or no, because we're doing so much of it. It's like, look, all the movies that, MPC Bangalore has been working on have been incredibly big visual effects movies, for, the last, 8 years, 10 years, it's like, it's huge. So, it's really, now the question is not like, can you do it? It's more the question of like, well, how do we help to now become filmmakers, better filmmakers in really helping the to tell the story. And I think it'll make all our jobs even more enjoyable, because we'll be more parts of telling the stories,
So Guillaume, this has been a truly incredible journey. There are the quality of your storytelling, not just in the big movies, but just in the hour we've spent together with all of the people that are on this particular SummitFX 2020. In fact, you answered in the last part just a couple of points that people had written here and they said, so how is it that you are going and creating something like this and completely going away from the assembly line method of VFX? And I think you talked about that, so hopefully that question got answered. You are a person, I think, who defies classification. Some people are known for sci-fi and others are known for something else, but you, as you explained, true artistry is you define classification and you've gone to create VFX. Even within the VFX genres, you have tried to push the envelope, and more power to you for all of that. Not taking away from anything that you have lining up your shelf as awards, which are truly richly deserved. I think those are probably the icing on the cake, right? The real stories that you were able to make these fantastic movies through your artistry, and that itself is the legacy that that you create as a filmmaker, and everything else is, the medals and the stripes, and may you get many more of that. I wanted to, on behalf of CII, the organizers of this event, just say that we couldn't have had a better opening day keynote to get you, here virtually. This doesn't take away from the fact that we're going to watch all the regulations around the world and try our very best to get you here as soon as possible, and personally host you along with the team. I can tell you that they love a good party, so you won't be disappointed. And maybe the next time we have a big event somewhere in this part of the world, you will be there live, and we don't have to create any pre-production for that. So it will be.
Yes, perfect. It would be my great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. You have a very good day, and you and your family stay safe, and talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.